idea why yours is so wildly loud when they're all like the same gain setting, but finally, we'll get this.
Yep.
Please.
And we'll call it to order at 5:31. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion.
A second.
Favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Moving on to the financial report.
Yours is still high too, Brian, isn't it?
I'll try to sit back so I don't yell into it.
Page 8, there is not a lot of change to this relative to what you saw 3-ish weeks ago. We've had minimal office expenditures in that time period. There were some funds encumbered from the 2025 budget into the 2026 budget, not within the departmental budget, within the county's IT functions. Those total a little more than $13,000. There was a small deposit into our donation fund, and that was the application fee for the first revolving loan fund application we've received since opening the fund back up. We are currently down to 2 active revolving loan fund borrowers, with the third having, and they're both in good standing, the third has paid off, bringing the available balance up to $397,000 and change. Do any of you have any questions?
Nathan, what was that first item you mentioned? Where's that on here?
What's that?
The IT movement.
So if you look down in this section here, summary of non-DCD appropriations, it is the orange column, the last line before the total, 643 and change, almost 644.
Okay.
Last month, that was closer to 631 or 630, but there were some funds that had been budgeted in 2025 and not expended, where one or more claims came in after the last claims approval that were, and the process of paying those out of last year's budget, since they came in last year, instead of taking them out of this year's budget, is for the county council to approve an encumbrance, and so 13,000 some was basically reappropriated.
Okay. Thank you.
And then our donation fund, like I said, a little bit extra came in for the RLF application fee, and nothing out of that. Any other questions?
Yeah, any other questions, discussion? A motion to approve the report?
A motion to approve the financial report?
I'll second.
Any other further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
Right. Moving on the agenda to page 9 in your packet. This resolution was part of last month's consent agenda. That sounds like it was you. I'll deal with it in a minute. Okay.
Sure.
And after the meeting, a couple of members pointed out to me that they hadn't realized that was in there. And so I wanted to bring this back to everyone's attention to answer any questions, explain it, see if anything needs to be addressed. Essentially, when the county commissioners and council implemented the restructuring of the CDC and the governance of my office, what happened is, we established the Redevelopment Commission, we established the Economic Development Commission, we established the Tourism Advisory Council, and we reactivated the Advisory Commission on Industrial Development. State code is not especially explicit or clear about the Industrial Park Board or the Tourism Commission, but it does state that a redevelopment commission and an economic development commission are permitted to have their own department of redevelopment, department of economic development, with their own director and other staff as may be necessary, and that sort of thing. We knew that maybe it'll never happen, but certainly at the time, we were not in the position where we were going to create a separate, like, there were gonna be 2 or more of me to run each of these commissions. The staffing isn't there, and even if it is, it's gonna be a tough sell to create like multiple director level positions with director level pay as opposed to staff. And at the same time, if like we just said, I am the economic development director and I'm the redevelopment director, but that's the only staff position the commissioner or the council would appropriate for, then we could end up in the situation where the redevelopment commission might want to fire me and the other 3 boards love me. And we end up in the situation where they don't want me working for them anymore, but the county council hasn't appropriated the funds to create somebody just to be a director of redevelopment, or contractual funds to hire a consultant to do this. And so the compromise was that the ordinance that the commissioners passed to establish the redevelopment commission, and the resolution they passed to restructure the CDC basically said, we acknowledge that the code permits these 2 particular commissions to have staff. We also acknowledge that the county council is not going to create new staff positions, especially at the director level at this point. So until such time as the county decides that we have sufficient workload to justify creating 1 or more new director positions to break those apart, we are going to implement this hybrid structure where instead of Nathan reporting to each one of these individually and being subject to review and potentially being terminated by one and praised by another and risking all that chaos, one departmental staff will serve all of them. So the Department of Community Development reports directly to the Community Development Commission and provides staffing to the remainder of them. And so that these commissions with which I work are not left out entirely of the supervisory, fire hire, and review process, we restructured the CDC so that the president of each would serve on it. And so what this is, it just says the redevelopment, we operated the first couple of years with the redevelopment commission, not even formally acknowledging the structure under which it operates. And so what this does is says, we know what the state law says, we understand where the council said, we acknowledge that the current structure established by the commissioners is this until such time as we, the council and the commissioners, come to a consensus that there is justification to hire individual staff in some new arrangement. So it doesn't change anything from the status quo. It basically just says we, the RC, acknowledge the structure under which we have been operating, so that it's not just the commissioners saying you're doing this. Commission, we're basically saying, okay, we accept that.
May I ask a couple
Yeah.
questions? Okay, so was there something that prompted the need for this now if the board has operated without it?
No, nothing prompted. I just thought that it might be advisable, and I'm planning to do the same thing with the Economic Development Commission, to let them actually actively say, okay, we hear this. We know what the law says. We understand, rather than not having a say in this.
And has there been like legal counsel review of this? Because I am not familiar with
This,
legal
no,
means.
the original ordinance and resolution, yes. So all this does is reflect the, and actually, it wasn't just local counsel. Adam Sturwald, the Barnes and Thornburg attorney who's going to be one of our guest speakers at the summit, actually helped me to draft all of that.
Of the,
Not this, but the
original.
original ones, that this one is echoing or accepted.
is that the 2023-09 that you're referencing?
Probably.
Okay.
I think I sent that out previously, but I didn't resend it. But yes, that sounds correct.
I think, and I don't, it doesn't matter to me whom reads it. I don't know if there's a particular role that should, but in the spirit of transparency and openness and communication, I know the public has asked previously at other like commissioner and council meetings for resolutions and ordinances to be read.
Yeah, we can do that right now if you want.
I think it would be beneficial just so that we can say this is what it is, and if anybody has any questions, they can bring forth. Like, I don't have any red flags on it. I wanted a better understanding.
Sure, totally get that.
but I would like it read.
Pulaski County Resolution 2026-RC-02 by the Pulaski County Redevelopment Commission affirming Pulaski County Ordinance 2023-06. Whereas Indiana Code 36714 addresses various matters pertaining to the departments of redevelopment and redevelopment commissions and their responsibilities, makeup, and capabilities. Whereas pursuant to IC 36714-2, the purpose of the department is to facilitate the clearance, replanning, and redevelopment of areas needing redevelopment, end quote, within its jurisdiction, including through the use of public money to acquire and to improve private property to, quote, afford a maximum opportunity for rehabilitation of development of areas by private enterprise, unquote. Whereas pursuant to IC 36714-3, the executive bodies of certain local units of government in Indiana are permitted to establish departments of redevelopment and redevelopment commissions responsible for controlling said departments, and counties are among such eligible units. Whereas Pulaski County is a county, and the Pulaski County Board of Commissioners, the board, is the executive and primary legislative body of the county. Whereas it is in the interest of the county to carry out the aforesaid purpose of the Department of Redevelopment and its governing commission through the use of various mechanisms afforded solely to such departments and commissions. Whereas pursuant to IC 36714-3C, quote, all of the territory in the county except that within a municipality that has a redevelopment commission constitutes a taxing district for the county, end quote. And no Pulaski County town has redevelopment commission or Department of Redevelopment. Whereas, in recognition of the county's need to carry out the aforesaid purposes in an efficient and streamlined manner that avoids duplication of services and redundant staffing, the board, in adopting Pulaski County Ordinance 2023-06, carry out aforesaid purposes, decreed that the Pulaski County Department of Redevelopment, the department, shall have no staff until such time as deemed to be necessary and appropriate, that the Pulaski County Redevelopment Commission, the commission, shall be served by the staff of the Pulaski County Department of Community Development, DCD, and that the president of the commission shall serve a concurrent term on the Pulaski County Community Development Commission. And whereas the commission recognizes that the resources have not become available to support and the workload has not yet accumulated sufficiently to justify the creation of staff positions within the department to serve the commission exclusively. Now, therefore, so be the following resolved by the commission. Pulaski County Ordinance 2023-06 adopted by the board is hereby affirmed in its totality. 2, if any part of this resolution shall be adjudged to be invalid by a court of proper jurisdiction, then it shall be conclusively presumed that the commission would have passed the remainder of the resolution without such invalid part. 3, this resolution shall be in effect and binding upon adoption.
One more question for clarification, just from a legal standpoint. In here, it says the clearance, replanning, and redevelopment of areas needing redevelopment. Has the county provided us with what that definition is? Like, how do we know what
This
an
the
area
code
is?
defines that. Yeah, it's taken straight out of the code. So when we get to the point at which we are actually undertaking projects like that, we'll be guided by what the code says and then what commissioners and council, depending on the specific responsibilities involved there, say we can do in those areas, and we'll allow.
Okay, sorry, say that one more time.
So when we get to such a point that we have funding allocated to us and we see a project we want to undertake that we believe fits our mission and our vision, we will be guided by how the code defines those things, and then also by what the commissioners and or council, as appropriate, will allow us to do within the context of what the code permits in defining.
Okay.
But it is a statutory definition.
Yeah, if you went to the actual the Indiana code, a lot of Indiana codes, like the initial section lays out definitions.
All right.
Yeah, so it's probably like 36714-1.
0.5 usually.
Yeah, or 1.5.
0.5, yeah,
But
kind
yes.
of.
And I can see if I can even pull that later.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments, concerns additionally on that issue?
Anything else? All right, moving on. Go to the
Under old business, returning to future visioning and comprehensive plan, and per last meeting's decision to table the rest of the things, all we have in front of us are the mission and vision statement question, and then the facade program so that that conversation does not grow old. Katie had started putting together a Google Doc with some proposed ideas for mission, vision, potentially a model, and some strategic objectives. Mr. Frayne, who was not able to join us this evening, had added some notes into there. I added some notes into there. Yesterday, Brandy shared an email expressing her thoughts, and then Brian followed up in response with some reply to that. He did not send it to everybody, but Stan also sent me an email today with some other documents that we're probably not ready to address, but also did chime in a little bit about mission and vision. So how do you all want to dive into this conversation based on everything that we have shared thus far? Do we want to start with the mission statement? Start with the vision statement? Do we want to start with bigger picture? I'm gonna go make some microphone adjustments while you guys start.
I mean, I can share with where I started on this. So I did try to be like a little bit vague and a little bit aspirational because we don't want it to constrain us from opportunities that we don't know exist yet, but we want enough to guide us. So maybe there's just entirely too much language here and we like make it more plain. You know, I'm open to your guys' thoughts on what that looks like.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I liked both what Nathan and Brian kind of added for the mission statement. Brian's I really liked because it's really short. It's like, what, 2 sentences? So it keeps it short, sweet, gets to the point, doesn't muddy the waters or constrict us in any way.
Can you show me? I'm sorry, I'm trying to.
I brought this separately. This was the document. Google Doc.
But is that in this one too or not?
I don't think my email made this.
Yeah, right
My
here.
email get in this?
Now, the email I do have handy, but it's not in the packet.
Yeah, I was going off of in that Google Doc where you added the words for the Redevelopment Commission's mission is to work with, collaborate with, partner with, whatever word we want to use, elected officials, townships, and community members to best make Pulaski County a place where businesses and families want to work, play, and live.
And my thought with that is kind of like what Katie said. Like I don't, and you know, Brandy, I appreciate your email. And I know what you're getting at. I'm not like dismissing the work that can go into that. I think we have a general idea of what we should be doing. I mean, some of it is Indiana code driven. There's only so much we can do based on what the Indiana code says. But just very broadly speaking, what are we doing to make Pulaski County a better place for businesses and families to live? And so I think that ultimately should be every decision that we make should be sort of with that in our eye as we're trying to approve projects, review projects, take applications for projects. So that's just my thought.
So I can share a little bit about like where I was coming from with the data component and why I offered to pursue that capacity of it. So I appreciate the flexibility of a vision statement being, or mission vision, however we want to package this objective statement being broad. However, if it's broad, then that doesn't help us to prioritize anything. And if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. And we do have like a lot of opportunities here.
But I guess I would push back. That's more like strategic planning. Like I think like you've got to set your foundation, and then as you get into it, then yes, we identify 3, 4, 5 things, and that's where I think you get into more of a strategic planning aspect. But even then, that just flows to your mission statement.
Well, it could, but the mission statement is a part of like a strategy. So like it should help us define what we're also saying no to and what we prioritize. And what I wanted was something I was hopeful for, a little more specific to Pulaski County so that when people come to us and ask us how we're prioritizing projects, because we do have a lot of opportunity in front of us. And our mission, our vision, our strategy, our strategic statement, whatever we want to call it, should also guide us in what we're saying no to and let people know how we came to choose maybe project A over project B. And I offered to take the path of compiling some of the data to inform it because, and I do also appreciate your community involvement in a lot of things. I too as well am pretty deep in what goes on in Pulaski County, and I feel like I have a good handle on it, but we can't just presume that fellow board members and the community all has an awareness of like what's informing our decision basis when we decide to like say yes to this project or no to another one. That's where I was coming from. I just wanted us to have the mission or vision to have a bit of guardrail in terms of helping our decision making. And if it were too broad, then it could be applicable to any county and not just Pulaski County. And I wanted to be more thoughtful of how we're being stewards to local taxpayer monies and ensure that it reflected our constituents of Pulaski County. And I'll just pause there.
So I agree with Brian that what you have proposed maybe is getting too much into the weeds specifically for the mission and vision statement. But I agree with you when you say that these statements, I think not only do we want them to be specific to our community, but also that they imply some guardrails and they help us to think about what we say no to and not what we just say yes to. And I feel like maybe the extra step Katie took in putting together her document might be the way to bridge that gap. I don't know that we need to get that deep into the data to craft a mission statement and a vision statement. I mean, we know a lot of what the data is going to tell us. We've got the strategic plan process coming forward. But I think that step A, what I think is step A and B are the mission statement and the vision statement. And we don't need to go deep into that. But I think that there is value in this idea of like these strategic objectives that Katie has put together that are a lot more precise and bullet pointed than the entirety of the strategic plan that the county is going to have that is going to address so many things from economic and redevelopment to land use to solar and projects we haven't even imagined could be coming in the future. And so maybe we get through the mission and vision statement and then through a combination of existing survey responses we have received, some of the data that Brandy has volunteered sort of to put together into a snapshot, we start working on the strategic objectives as a step C, knowing that those can always be amended as the county gets through the strategic plan process or the comprehensive plan process, sorry. And we can say, all right, we thought these objectives A, B, and C were fantastic. And then they were based on the good data that we had at the time. But now, 13 months later, we have this new comprehensive plan and A and C are great, but B and D really don't necessarily jive with what the public has given us and the comprehensive plan tells us, and we can come back and I feel like if you start writing mission and vision statements that are too susceptible to revision every time you have a change in public input, you're gonna kind of destabilize psychologically, so to speak, where you go, but your strategic objectives are more malleable. And so I think Brandy is onto something very good, but I think it's personally better applied to the strategic objective section Katie has proposed than to the mission and vision.
The mission and vision statements need to not be changing. They need to outlive any of our time on the board. It needs to be true in 15 years what we put in this mission statement. And it basically just needs to lay out, we're working on housing, infrastructure, economic opportunity, childcare, revitalization.
I agree that it has to outlive. I was just hoping to offer a little more specificity to what's going on within Pulaski County and bringing things of that nature. And I don't see this as, I didn't see it. So I didn't plan to go too deep into the data, just using it so that we can inform which areas we thought we should focus on from a prioritization standpoint. Because in the big scope of things, as we all know, things will change, but they're not going to change significantly in the next 5 or 10 years. And that data would help all of us have the same baseline understanding. It's not like I would be putting percentages into the mission or vision. It was just let's make sure that we're being thoughtful and making an informed prioritization approach to the mission and vision. And then we would use that later when things such as strategy came about. I wouldn't see it as not nearly as deep as something like the county's comprehensive plan or anything that simple bullets that just say this is the current state. But if you don't feel that it's needed, that's fine. I just wanted to put it out there and make the offer. If I were doing this for a client, that's what I would be doing. I would be pulling the data and getting a solid landscape and an aligned perspective of the county before we went forth with something such as this. But if you want to modify the order,
I appreciate the offer, and I do think there's value in that in the next step. If others disagree and think we should pause on adopting a mission statement, I am here to work for you, not the other way around. That is my thought, though, that should come like next, and then deeper dives going forward as we engage with the plan commission and the consultants in the.
So here's my other thought of staying broad, and I do understand what you're saying about trying to set some guardrails up that's a little bit more specific to Pulaski County. I guess it's my hope and my sincere desire that when we get a comprehensive plan, that there's a true agenda flowing down from the commissioners and the council that helps us guide what needs to be done. Because yes, we can look at projects and we can look at different areas that might need help, but again, if the comprehensive plan is going to identify 5 major things that need to be done within the next 5 years, how do we help step up and fill that role? So that's where I'm like, I don't necessarily want to get so deep into stuff where then, and again, mission statements can be changed. It's not that hard. It's not the end of the world. But I think of staying broad and saying, okay, whatever we want to do is to make Pulaski County better. And I know that's very overgeneralizing. How do we fit that in to truly working together with commissioners and council members and the drainage board and the zoning board and the economic development? Like, how do we all work together when we get a comprehensive plan that has some ideas that we all can work towards to get some things done? Because I think we all get pulled in different directions and everybody gets working on their own entity. I really think some type of agenda is really needed for us to accomplish.
So I think that the recommendation that was put forth by Nathan is reasonable. I'm sorry, am I?
No, I just, real quick, again,
I
I'm
didn't
really
see
late
that,
to the party,
sorry.
so Nathan was sent a whole bunch of documents. I'm probably not worth bringing up right now, but it is relevant. I'm more on your side, not to say that we need to beat up the vision statement, but I tend to solve problems by working backwards, right? And so that's exactly what I did today, and I sent it to Nathan like 4 or 5 hours ago, which is clearly not enough time for anybody to review it. But one of the things it had in there was like a scoring metric, right? So, and there's an example of that, of some properties in Pulaski County to say, you can adopt a scorecard to keep us from doing this for 3 or 4 hours over a single property. I don't know if that helps you, but that's where I started. So the vision statement wasn't going to make me choose between these 2 addresses. I needed a different metric that none of us could argue a 10 is better than an 8. And we can move in a direction like that.
I did spend a little bit of time just quickly going through. I think there's a lot of good stuff. I think that might be next step. I think that,
I agree, and that's what I'm saying.
It is really more like implementation.
I started there,
but
working my way backwards. The last attachment does have the vision statement and the mission statement. I got it from starting over there. So I don't know if maybe you see
That's the way
bring
I
some,
work too.
would bring
actually.
some ease to you to say, okay, do we all have to focus in that one area? I think that's why there's multiple of us on this commission, to where if, like, for you and I, we don't want to sit up here and battle 20 properties and not have a way to decide, then that's something we can work on. And then the vision statement can be something, like individual committees essentially that you're presenting to the overall board. I don't know if all of our opinions get completely sucked into one idea that we would ever agree.
Yeah.
No.
And almost take a committee's recommendation to say, okay, we've got some people that are working on how we're going to score these properties. We have some other people that are handling a different area. And then, but to your point, my mission statement example that I have that you guys haven't seen yet was driven by me starting over here. And what are we actually going to do once we get past the mission statement?
Sure. And it did land fairly close to what Brian and I had proposed. Worded a little bit differently,
For
but
sure.
very similar in the big picture.
So can we take the next month and maybe kind of combine Brian's, Nathan's, but
I'll throw stands in
everybody's-
there too.
Yeah.
I can just add that to the
So
document.
throw stands in so that we can all review it, and then like sometime in the next month, make time to get in here and condense it into what we think it should be. And then we can bring it to the next meeting, read it, and approve it.
And I don't think, Randy, if you want to start spending a little bit of time on digging into the things you proposed, if you want to do that sort of so that we are like ready to glide right into talking about strategic objectives, I can't speak for the board, but I wouldn't be opposed to that, so that we don't spend the next meeting
Just
finally agreeing on the mission and vision, and then like, oh, hey, you guys came here for that.
Yes, and I
will share Brian, or Stan's documents with everyone after.
Yeah, I focus on the operational side of things. That's where I feel comfortable, and that's what my focus was. And I can share that with whoever's sitting here.
I would like to see that.
Yeah.
And I also very much so appreciate and agree with either a scorecard or a rubric or something that helps us, like, without bias and without personal agendas, et cetera, to say, this community, this is how we are going to approach the scoring of things, and this is how we're going to decide, would it be project A or project B, and do some sort of impact-based component of it. That
What Stan said, it's really,
You can just see here if you want it. There's quite a few properties on there, but it basically, you have a scorecard and then you kind of tell about the property. And then you can go from there.
I don't think, Stan, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know that we really put together scorecards for necessarily like other kinds of projects. It was mostly like the property acquisition.
Yep.
Slash flipping slash whatever.
And that's what the research that I was doing, not to get off topic too much, but it was, I think the last meeting I attended, it was like, we're looking for that home run, probably maybe a bit too much. And so the research that I was doing is like, let's just buy a house and flip it. I mean, there's a lot, it's easy. The properties are there. I know at one time we were talking about like a sports rec area. And you know what I'm saying is to me, it felt like we were looking for that home run. We were going to double our bottom line in 1 year. And it's like, let's just go find a $70,000 house and maybe sell it for $140,000. And so that's where my focus was here.
Speaking of the sports rec, you have the packets from the meetings you weren't able to attend in front of you, so you can take that. The project spreadsheet that I put together is in there, so you can see where we sort of hash those out and work through, like, there's more work to be done, but it's like priority, complexity, time, cost. So that conversation has continued.
Yep.
are we allowed to have like sub-working committees?
We can absolutely establish committees.
Or just meetings, like, is there any,
How does it get an open door law?
like, could we get together over a lunch session if somebody wanted and say, Stan and I can work on a rubric and Katie and Brian could work on
Yes,
the
and
mission or vision, or
when we
is
start
that?
talking about like 1 or 2 members meeting like that, if you're bringing it,
And bring it back
if you're
to
bringing
the,
it, that gets into at least a gray area with the open door law.
okay,
Because even if it is not a final determining body, if it is making official if it is any subset of the membership of an entity and it is coming back to make recommendations to that entity, you start getting into open door law territory.
so
We could
work independently on shared docs is the
Yeah.
continued path?
Yeah, and there's nothing saying we can't do a work, like a lunch meeting or an evening meeting where it's not really agenda driven, it's more of a work session. Those are still open door law. We can do them, and we can do them as a committee or as the full commission.
Okay,
It's very limited when all of us or a subgroup of us are allowed to meet behind closed doors.
okay, that's why I'm asking, like, I agree with Katie, like,
There are-
I would like to get to the
what
point
you
where we
would-
can say, hey, we're moving forward on this project and we're making,
What you have suggested feels
Traction.
like it should
Should
be
be allowed.
an exception
Yeah.
to open door law, but in Indiana, it is very broad in what they consider subject to.
okay.
I really like the rubric idea, because like to your point specifically about flipping a house or something, it's like we might get our thoughts stuck on, oh, we're gonna do the annex or something, but maybe there's one that's like a better priority. But I wonder if we shouldn't have rubrics for the different kind of missions.
Oh, definitely. I think that is a great long-term idea. I think Stan has given
I
us a
think the project
good
type,
starting
each
point.
project type should have
Yes.
a
Yes.
rubric that we all agree on, so.
So I guess this gets into another stick in the weeds. Do we have bylaws or some type of charter?
We just have right now the departmental bylaws / CDC bylaws. So
Yeah.
that is, and I can share those, and you guys can start sharing thoughts you have on things you might want to see, like pick out of that and add to that as
I think that's a good document to share with
Yeah.
community, because then you can outline sort of like some of our, criteria for things as we're going through projects, and that's where you might be able to share a rubric and say, this is what we use to identify why we might go with this versus why we might go with this.
All right, so I guess, are we taking you as a motion? Is
Yeah,
that what you're doing?
I'm gonna make a motion to spend the next month putting together an abbreviated mission statement that combines kind of all of our ideas that can be read at the next hearing and approved.
Get a motion?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, any further discussion on that? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Do we want to spend any more time talking about vision statement and strategic objectives, or just move on to the next item on the agenda? I mean, I think the vision statement and strategic objectives component of Katie's documents are a lot messier than the vision statement. We might be better off waiting.
To your point about Brandon, I think there is some benefit to having maybe a little bit of data to stare at as we start thinking about getting into the strategic vision. So,
Yeah, like maybe once we've kind of digested some of this, these get more specific. The
Yeah,
strategic
I agree.
objectives just get more specific.
Okay, then we will move on to pages 15 through 18 of your packets. Like I said, I'm not expecting us to make any decisions today. We'll be ready to take this to the county council. We'll talk about funding. But I did not want the conversation regarding a facade improvement grant program to go forward. So I didn't even dive into like the micro loan component, like the sister program that they do like in Radius, Indiana or Marshall County for now. I just focused on the grant component of it. And I largely ripped off the Culver program, their rules, as we saw last month. If you see yellow highlighted text, that is something where I might have got a little inconsistent, but largely that is where I added some text that I thought we should put up for discussion about how we want to approach it. Like Culver County says it's 50%, Culver says it's a 50% match. Do we want it to be a flat 50% match, or do we want to be up to 50% if we feel like a project is worthy, but not maybe worthy for the entire 50%, depending on what it is? I also added in there, as you may recall, Culver has a $30,000 maximum, and we had discussed how that might be a bit much for us in the pilot program, and so I said maybe we should just maximum more 10,000, whether it's one project or multiple projects in the same year, with a 30 addressed later, a 30,000 max over a 5-year period. And that can always change if the program takes off and we have the county allocating funding for it one way or another. But I thought we might be better off being a little more conservative with how much we're going to allow over 1 year and a half a decade before we blow the project with the allocation on like two projects.
Yeah. So I guess I always like flexibility. So by saying for no more than or up to 50, gives you flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
And then I do like the idea of limiting it to, no more than 10,000 per recipient per year, at least initially.
Anyone, any pushback on that? At this point in the draft rules guidelines, do we want to address issue of estimated cost versus actual or unforeseen or not? Like,
We kind of discussed last meeting, kind of having a separate thing for the unforeseen costs. I kind of like that idea, just because, I mean, being in construction, and I know you've seen this in the past several years, the change orders,
so that
within a
when we get
project.
to the stage of maybe having a sister loan program.
Mhm.
So, okay.
Yeah, I think a sister loan program would be perfect for something like that.
I'm inclined to agree, but I just wanted to make sure that that was out there. Any different opinions on from what?
So just so I'm clear on that, so they bring us, it's going to cost 20,000 and I'm asking for 10, it winds up costing 25, we gave you the 10, you're either on the hook for the 5.
Or you could.
Or if we do the sister loan, they would borrow
2,500. And when we get to that point, we may have to decide if we're going to have a cap on the percentage for the loan, or if because it's going to be repaid, we're willing to like that whole 5,000.
Yeah.
For now, I'm inclined to agree with Isaiah that if we create flexibility is good, but if we get into a project and that happens, so we're giving you 10. I mean, 10's our max anyway, but we're giving you 8,000, and we've got 3 other applications in the docket. We can't really justify revisiting your application because costs were worse than they could, and then
remind me, so they come with a proposal, they front the whole thing and we reimburse
At the
50%?
time,
I'm sorry.
we will address
Go
that.
ahead, that's right.
In Culver, as far as I can tell, the full redevelopment commission is involved in the decision-making process. We have talked quite a bit about having like buy-in and input from the towns and or the Main Street organizations where such organizations exist. So what I am proposing as a starting point for that conversation is that we would have a designated facade program committee. It would be me in a non-voting ex officio capacity with 3 of you. Well, I don't know if we could let Joe be on this since it was just a recommendation and not a final determination or not. But 3 of the members. I thought maybe an officer or designee of the board of the Historical Society, since a lot of these are going to potentially be historic buildings, and there might be, we might choose to implement some sort of architectural, aesthetic, historic standards, and then where there is a Main Street organization, a member of their board or design committee, and when there is not, a member or designee of the town council. So it'd be a 5-person committee that would bring a recommendation to the full, that would do the deep dive and then provide like a 1-page summary to the full commission for a final decision. If that's too many tiers, I don't know, we don't have to have a committee, but I came up with this in consideration of the conversation we had about wanting the buy-in and engagement from local leadership. And then I said, if by chance there's like a project, say in Star City, the township trustee or designee would step in instead of the Main Street Winnemac / Uptown Project / town council member.
I really like this idea. I think we're gonna, when you get into architectural standards, it becomes a little bit more tricky. There's a lot involved with that, and like to what degree do you hold them accountable? That's a pretty easy way to blow your budget more than anything. But I want architectural standards, but it's a tricky thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming we would identify sort of that 5th person based on the township group, right?
Yes, based on where it is. So in Francisville, it might be Morgan Federer, who's the president of the Uptown Project. In Medaryville, it might be their clerk treasurer or a town council member or somebody they designate. In, Star City is Van Buren Township, right? It might be Lenora Hoover as the Van Buren Township trustee. And even with the 3 redevelopment commission seats, I don't know that it would have to be like, oh, hey, Katie, Kyle, and Brandy, you are the committee for this year. We could rotate if we had like a lot. We got an application, which 3 of you want to step in and serve in this one, so that everybody gets to be part of it who wants to be, and we're not asking 3 people to do all of the extra workload.
So I'm confused because I thought that's what she was asking, was about having a committee to do some work, and I thought that was getting gray.
No, those committee meetings would have to be open to the public. Like,
The difference was this was just going to be
part of it. So part of that
over a sandwich, but okay.
Those mean these would probably be done in an executive session first, because the committee can go into executive session under the what you call the economic development prospect exception. But the final decision, so like we could interview. So let's say the building Connie owns in downtown Winnemac. She wanted to apply for a facade grant. That building's in pretty nice condition, at least the facade, but we could hold an executive session to hear her proposal, discuss it with her, ask her questions, but then would have to go into an open public meeting to make a final decision on the recommendation we're going to take to the full commission.
But I think what's perhaps.
But it seems like that's a lot of work. So you would have to meet. I'm confused because I don't know how you would do a project of that magnitude in the public's eyes. You would meet, have phone calls, and do the stuff and things. And is that why you would be resourcing outside of this body for the other seats?
Well,
and how do you do that? I'm just curious. I'm a big fan of committees, and I'm supporting it. I just want to understand.
So I think the idea is, right, if we're going to approve a project that's going to take place in Francisville, has Francisville had some say in that, right? I mean, again, I don't know. We're just approving projects that may not jive with what they want for their downtown. Right? So I think I think having, now again, whether we want to potentially say you have to bring something saying this has been an approved project, then we could potentially do it here. But I think the thought is just to have somebody from that township or that town who's got a little bit of skin in the game, so that they might be able to say, yeah, hey, this is a project that we're supporting, and we'd like to.
And like I said, it's optional. I mean, the money that is going to be involved in this program, if we ever get it going, is going to be, at least initially, it's going to be county money. So nobody else outside of the county bodies involved in the process have to have a say. But there was a lot of conversation about reflecting what Brian just pointed out, like wanting to make sure that it's not just, I mean, obviously the building owner, presumably, or the business owner is going to be from that town, but somebody from that community who has a vested interest in redeveloping and strengthening that community is involved in the conversation. We don't have to allow that, but the committee process allows us to make room for that.
I agree with you 100%. I think that's where my head was going, is if we were to flip a house, I don't think any of us here are actually doing that. We would hire a general contractor that's trusted, that would do the day-to-day operation. I guess that's where I kind of started to drift a little bit, was just understanding that general contractor wouldn't actually be on a committee.
No, the committee, like,
So
in
these
that
people would just be general contractors that
in
experts in their area
Yeah.
that would do we're essentially hiring to do the project.
in a scenario like that, whether it was just a full redevelopment commission doing all of it, or if we had a residential recovery committee that's like 4 of you, the decision to hire a particular contractor, to issue debt if it were a big enough project, or to request, like, that would have to be done in a public meeting. And we might expect the contractor to give monthly or quarterly or whatever meeting, come to our meeting and say, this is how we're coming along. But no, that contractor wouldn't be expected to be showing up to committee meetings. We would approve the plans. We would work with the contractor and or an architect, whatever the plans are for flipping that house or that apartment building or whatever. We approve those through the whole public meeting process as we're required to, and then we send the contractor off to do the job.
And that's where I guess I'm not seeing a difference. If you were talking about Star City, you have that invested specialist or whatever. They want to see their community well. I still would expect quarterly, they would come in and present status updates and how
and that's going to
oversee the entire project.
Well, a project like this is probably not going to last long enough that we need like quarterly reports, but they're going to be required to submit like an update on progress, or the receipts are going to be required to show like before and after photographs. So yeah, that there's still going to be an expectation of reporting, but the decision-making, the front-end decision-making process is the only time where the committee is going to have to be involved if we want a committee, or because we're going to have to make a formal decision to allocate $7,358 to Connie's building.
I think we're talking about 2 different programs here.
Yeah, so in this.
So
facade program-
I get what you're talking about, like for us to potentially like flip a house, this facade program would be a business owner entity, somebody would come to us and say, hey, I want to do some work on my building.
Like
It's
paint, windows.
Yeah, windows, paint,
And awning.
signage to beautify and say, it's going to cost us, it's going to cost me 10, I'm asking for the commission for 5,000. I've hired X, Y, and Z construction company, they're going to do it all. We're just basically allocating the money to help offset that. Versus what you're saying was like us as a commission physically buying a house, then us hiring the contractor to flip the house. Different.
I definitely, maybe I was saying it confusingly. If that's the only role, is essentially you're loaning money or giving a grant and making sure the money's being spent wisely. I guess why would you have the whole board? That seems like a.
And like I said, we absolutely can do it that way. Okay.
Well, that's what I was trying to figure out, is
yeah.
how much effort goes into that selection process and management process that you would need 3 individuals to have 4 separate public meetings in between our monthly meeting.
Well, I think the final approval would come we wouldn't schedule a special full commission meeting just for that. We would just put that recommendation from the committee on the agenda for the next meeting. And I guess we don't have to have a committee. I only included that in reflection of the conversations about like making sure that there is, like, bringing the individual towns into the conversation. We don't have to do that.
So draft.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
So can I do? Waste it. Don't know what role. A little bit of thought. And like what we're asking of them, part of it, like they vote. Like, can we think through like what their role is, or ask what that could look like? The committee is the way we do it, or if there's something else I don't know top of mind. Because they wouldn't have like voting power.
Sure.
Well, that's the question, is if they had voting power.
You're bringing them in to the
We
committee.
are the.
If they had voting power, it would only be at the recommendation level. So say the three of you next to each other are the committee, along with Morgan Federer and Kathy Thompson from the Historical Society. The five of you would all get a say on what your committee recommends, but at the end of the day, it's the 7 people at this table who decide whether or not to accept that recommendation. And so the 3 of you, Kathy and Morgan, are gonna have the more in-depth, longer conversation with Mike Stimpson. He's a building owner and business owner in downtown Francisville. You're gonna have that. And then we're gonna ask him to come to the full commission meeting, but we're not gonna put him on the spot for 45 minutes. We're like, hey, this is Mike. This is what he wants to do. This is the 1-paragraph distillation of the project and our recommendation. We think we should or should not give him the $7,300, and it was a 4-to-1 vote with Isaiah opposing. And then you can ask questions, but you're not going to be expected as a full commission to rehash the whole conversation. You're going to put trust that your 3 representatives and the other 2 committee members have done a good job.
To my point, though, is if you take 3 of us and 2 vote no, and these non-commissioned people voted it to get it to the overall board.
Well, the overall board might say,
Well, they can say no just as easy, but are we wasting our time that anything was brought before us without the recommendation of the actual leadership?
So I guess,
So just more time, I think, is what we're asking.
So, and I guess I go back to, if we get into a project, now all of a sudden there's a lawsuit because somebody didn't do something right in the town. Could we have caught that ahead of time? It's like, that's where I'm going to, whether they come to us with some type of promissory note saying, hey, this is run by the town board, or this is run by the main, like, so that way we would have some coverage of saying, okay, we're blessing this project and we know it's going to be done well and properly and it's been approved by the local municipality. I guess that's where I'm coming from having some type of, not only just community sort of buy-in, but also just to make sure that when we're blessing money, we're making sure that it's going to be used properly and that town is.
and like Randy said, we can go back and reflect on what the local engagement looks like. And maybe we don't end up having a committee, but there's some other way. I just wanted to make sure that we had the conversation about how we approach making sure that the town of Winnemac or Main Street Winnemac in some capacity has a voice, even if not a vote, but has a voice in a project that happens in downtown Winnemac and so on.
Okay, I think it's, to her point, it's maybe 30 days here to figure out.
Yeah, it may be that there,
Because I think you have to get them involved. I think, like I said, I think when you say committee, I think maybe that's where I got lost.
Sure.
It's like, that just seems like a lot for somebody that's not here.
And so we looked at Culver, single entity, single town. It's a little bit easier than potentially across
everyone
9 townships and
lives in that one town. They're appointed by that.
Every,
correct.
and that could be a lot.
Yeah.
So let's know how we.
For sure. I just, like I said, I wanted to make sure we have that conversation. A month from now, we may come back and say exactly what Nathan has said is how we should do this. We might say we don't want a committee at all, and we might land somewhere in between.
But in ask, also haven't said we're full-fledged going in.
Right.
We do it for a month, but like, there's no pressure to have.
Correct.
To have this finalized.
Correct.
It's not like we're-
Correct. I think, and again, I don't know, I'm going to propose, could we see some type of facade improvement program that maybe is countywide? That a
That is
different county may have a countywide facade program. Have you come across one?
I have not, but I can look for some more.
I will say before we move on, I do like the idea of having a committee because I see this as kind of a living project that it might be beneficial for just, 3 or so people from this board kind of be dialed in and focused on that while we start flipping houses, we're doing a rec center, something like that. This can't fall by the wayside.
I think that's a really good point, Isaiah, that if we get to the point where we are well-funded and we are actively, whether it's commercial or residential, like having some of you dial into the facade program, some of you dial into renovating the East Annex for the county to get it back on the market. Some of you dialed into this big sports complex idea so that not all of you are carrying the weight of everything. And when we come to our meetings, everybody's going to have a say in the final conversation and the final vote. But Isaiah, as chair of the facade program committee, can work with me to like carry the weight of that part of it. So not everybody is getting every single detail of every single project or every single grant application. I think that's fair to keep in mind. Right now, when this is the only thing that like might be close to something we can actually taste, it might seem excessive, but as we build, it may become a very valuable way of managing stress and burden.
So I looked at this facade program a little bit differently. I thought that the business owners would come here, say they wanted to paint their building, we would approve it and give them money. I think this is getting way, way too complicated. No committees, no subcommittees. We are the committee. We are the board. We sit here. Business owner sits there, proposes, fills out the application. We approve it. I think we can simplify this about 95%.
I think we want a little more oversight if it's a historically sensitive building and you're like, you know what? The business owner wants to put metal siding on it. And we're going to be like, maybe we don't want to spend tax dollars on that.
Yeah,
Which is where
that's
you
when
want
we
a committee to get more in depth.
That's where we would discuss it. And
Like I said, I don't think we have to have a committee. There was a reason I did that. It does make it more complicated, but I do think you might have gotten the cart and the horse mixed up a little bit as far as like having them come here and then fill out the application. I think the application needs to come in first. Just, I don't want them to come propose. If I'm going to look at that application and say, this is the stupidest thing ever, they're not going to.
sure, but
I don't disagree that this is an extra layer of complications, whether there's value in that complication.
and also
Long-term, if not short-term.
if I was the business owner and I filled out the application, came in here and proposed it, and then I had the trustee tell me that she didn't like or he didn't like my idea, I don't know, as a business owner, if that's very friendly of a facade program when you have people that you don't know telling you that they don't like your idea of what to do with your building, to do with your.
I would agree, but I would also
Adding-
say if
adding
we're
in-
using public funds, then
you're
there is an
adding-
expectation you're going to be subject
Right,
to
yeah.
constraints.
You're adding a lot of layers to a facade program.
Well, let's spend the next month, everybody kind of thinking about how we want to approach that. Maybe
I
it
think
is.
there's a hybrid there, because again, it's the size of the project. You're talking about window seals, they'll be done by the end. Talking about a bigger project, having an oversight committee to say how you pay it out. And that's what the oversight committee's doing, right? Is you have to follow these guidelines and you're turning in invoices. We're not just giving you half up front. I hope you do a nice job at having.
Well, that's going to be a rule either way. We're going to have that program, whether it's reimbursement or we cut the check straight to the contractor. That's going to be there.
I agree, and I'm saying I'm agreeing with him too, is what are we doing here? First, we need to define that, right? Are we building, or are we taking hard-earned tax dollars and making sure that they're spent well? So I'm probably not going to pick out the shades, depending on where we land as a board, but having the oversight committee to say, if I'm going to give you your third check, I need you to come in and present to me the status. Are you spending it? What are you doing? And be as transparent as possible what those rails are, right? If we have any reservations about color, we should outline that in advance. And when they turn in an invoice that they bought yellow siding, we're not going to reimburse you.
Part of the application.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So, what do you think here? They give input, say, in order to apply, this is what we need. The criteria, baseline criteria for approval, this This is a simple one-page application.
Right, and then you would have the oversight to make sure that they're staying within
I don't
the
know.
rails for payment.
If we have some people, we might need to involve just simple, frankly, I don't want.
Right, I think to Kyle's point, we want people to come. I mean, if it's, I gotta jump through all these hoops, it's not worth the $5,000. I mean, it's not
We
like,
want to make it as easy as possible. We just want to make sure that we are stewarding public funds well in a way that, well, like spends the money well, but is like, we're not putting pink metal siding on a building across from the courthouse. And I realize, like Katie said, once you start getting into architectural standards, it can get a lot messier. And so we have to be very careful about that, but I do think we probably can agree that there are certain things that we don't want to fund.
Right.
Might be harder always to determine what we do want to fund, but, all
Some
right.
of it's legal, like some of it just from a discretionary, or, some of it we don't like.
I mean, to be fair, it's a,
From the legality standpoint, I don't want somebody.
I mean, you're right, and we obviously want to cross our I's and dot our T's, but at the end of the day, it's a discretionary program. If we don't think it fits our mission and vision, then we don't, like, that should be sufficient. If putting up a 2-story building in downtown Francisville that has no windows and is clad in vinyl siding doesn't fit with our vision, like, no, we're not going to pay for that new siding because you're just creating this like tooth gap in the mouth of downtown Francisville all of a sudden.
Whereas if they want to do that on their own with their own money, they're allowed to.
We're
But
not-
we don't have to promise our tax dollars to it. No. Not that we need to be nitpicking their decisions, but like
I think it
some,
goes back to just kind of having some sort of scorecard, something where, you know, they, again, if they turn in something to us for us to review upon voting, something's going to be on there that makes you want to vote no, or something on there that's going to make you want to vote yes, and we'll have an opportunity to discuss that. If they don't tell you the color, well, we're going to kick the can down the road, and we need to know what the color is. And I think that's a absolutely fair answer to give them, and they come back in 30 days and they have more information for us. And we continue to do that. And I think that's how you do it. And if you deny it, I don't know that you have to, and maybe that's what you're talking about, is I don't have to tell them everything I hate about their design. I just deny their application.
And I think that part of what I can do while we're all noodling this next is I can take the scorecard you sent me and see how I might be able to start finagling it and to fit this program, and then share that with everybody to add to.
all right, any further discussion on this?
Just one quick point. I know there was kind of some note on sidewalks.
Oh yeah, we've got a lot. We're like only like 1/3 of the way through this.
Yeah. Sidewalk thing, with my personal experience with working with the state and everything, I would say that we shouldn't touch sidewalks whatsoever, because then you get into ADA compliance, which is known to change roughly every 4 years, new administration. So I would recommend we stay very far away from touching sidewalks themselves.
Green is where Culver had something that concerned me. Yes, and like I appreciate but I don't want us to fund a sidewalk project that turns out not to be ADA compliant when the whole goal was to make it ADA compliant. I don't want to have orange barriers in front of the salon and the ag advisory office because the project that was supposed to make it compliant didn't make it compliant. So the next yellow there, some of that I just highlighted, I drew attention that I combined a couple of Culver things and reworded it, but it's largely what they said. But I also added a line, and this gets back to the sort of the subjectivity and the messiness that Katie mentioned, but some sort of historic standards as applicable to commercial facades. So that, again, we're not putting like aluminum siding over a brick facade, that sort of thing. And again, we don't need to hash out every fine-tuned detail today, but I think that's something to noodle over the next month too, is in what ways and how deep do we want to get into architectural / historic / aesthetic standards to make sure that we are stewarding this one well and we're not like creating an eyesore with tax money. And that kind of goes the same with the next thing on doors, windows, and awnings. Like, I don't know that I really like the idea of using this program for somebody to put one of those last few like shingled awnings that we have in a couple of places on Pearl Street. At the same time, like, if there's a building that was built and there are certain proportions that you recognize as subconsciously being pleasing to your eye, I don't want us to use this program maybe to give somebody the money to brick in half of their window square footage and put new windows in that make it look more like they are residential windows than they are commercial windows on a commercial property. I understand the arguments why somebody might do that, but I don't know if that really fits in with the objectives of redeveloping the community if we turn our downtown storefronts into something mimicking somebody's dining room window. Again, thought I had up for discussion for noodling over the next 30 days. Lighting, signage, window graphics, I don't know if that might get a little too into the weeds of talking about architectural standards there. Masonry work, do we want to allow that on non-facade? It's a facade program, but if there is a building that is, whether it's a street corner or an alley corner, or otherwise isn't a shared or party wall, do we want to allow tuck pointing, brickwork, other, even siding, whatever, on the alley wall, or just focus on the actual street facing facade? That's a question I think we need to address. I am, for what it's worth, I agree with Isaiah that, again, sidewalks are probably too messy. Culvert also allows repair or replacement of existing driveways, including paving, seal coating, and painting. I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing because those are existing things, but also is like improving what are effectively holes in downtown rather than the actual face of downtown, something we would necessarily want to prioritize. I don't know that we should exclude those, but they might maybe be something that would take lower priority over somebody who is putting a new fresh coat of paint on their, or doing all of their brickwork and tuck pointing and updating, if you get what I'm saying. Like, parking lots in downtown are not really the most valuable or effective use of space, but they do exist and driveways do exist. And so if it means that that lot looks better than it does now, we might want to do it, but we might, if we're facing, if we've got $10,000 left in the budget for the year and person A wants to replace their windows and put a fresh coat of paint up, and person B wants to pave their driveway in the middle of downtown, I'd lean towards improving the actual building over the. Yes, exactly.
I think most of this goes back to
Yep.
not subjective.
That's not as.
Do we, we had the conversation last month about, like, it gets really touchy if we start talking about like requiring ADA compliance or improvements and the amount of money we could spend just on helping somebody to do that as opposed to, and
I think the facade.
yes. Right. So what I was going to get to is,
Inside.
but so
A step or ramp.
would we fund, for instance, replacing a sloped entrance that isn't compliant or steps with a compliant slope entrance? I agree. Inside, we're not touching.
About like the sidewalk stuff. That's where it's messy, probably not in our.
But that might also be putting in a new door. As I have been learning lately, even something like that door closer is subject to ADA assessment and making sure that it takes at least 5 seconds for the door to close and that it doesn't take more than 5 pounds of force to pull it open. If somebody's got a door that they even like. So-
The look, and then it would be on that person though.
So again, that's where you're writing in there, yeah, right, where a delineation is, right?
So ADA improvement that is part of this facade, we might be okay with, but not ADA, obviously inside or ADA
It's
sidewalks.
still the facade. Their reason for being is still the facade. The
Kind of
doors are the facade.
Separating the idea of, yeah, they're doing it for ADA compliance, but we're doing it because it's part of the facade. Is that what you're saying?
I can, yeah, that makes
I
sense.
agree with that.
Whereas you guys were saying a little bit trickier, the sidewalks, the steps.
Yes. I think that's a good way of. Do we need any specific verbiage to give us flexibility to allow something besides what we end up listing here as, or do we just say the redevelopment commission reserves the right to fund projects not listed here on a case by case basis? That feels like it's clean enough. Culver does not allow demolition of property. I think that's generally a good rule, but I was wondering if we want to allow any like small scale demolition that is required for what so the ADA compliant door example, maybe it involves widening the doorway, which means demolishing, rebuilding a little bit of wall so that they can fit the wider door in. Are we open to that sort of demolition as long as it is necessary for the thing they actually want to do? Or do we just say that's excluded and we will just pay for the door and installation itself?
I think that's fine.
I would keep it clean. Because again, now you're getting into subjectivity of, well, what's the percentage of demolition that we allow? I just say, hey, look, it's going to cost you 16, the door's going to cost 6.
We'll pay half of
We're
6.
having half of 6.
Okay. I've addressed the next thing there. Farther down, next yellow, do we want to require any kind of fee? I mean, these aren't very large amounts, and so I'm a little hesitant to, with tax abatements, we have an application fee. Revolving loan fund, we have an application fee. It doesn't even cover the cost of like all 3 EDC members to show up, but it defrays the cost a little bit. Even when we do like the smallest of our RLF amounts, I didn't know if we wanted to contemplate a loan for this or just say, look, it's already a grant program. It's never going to be more than $10,000. That's just not.
Well, my thing is if we're going to come to, I want people to use the program. And if they're going to wind up, whatever we decide, but if we're going to wind up coming here anyway to get final approval, we're going to be here anyway. It's not like we're offsetting the cost of
So
coming to a
the
special
only
meeting.
scenario in which that might be an issue is if we do end up with some sort of committee and the committee members have to be
Sure.
paid to come to an extra meeting. But you're right. The final determination is going to be at a public meeting on a regular schedule. We might move a meeting, but we're not going to schedule a special meeting just to decide that.
There's nothing to say if it gets crazy and we all have to start meeting more, then we put an application fee in.
Anyone think we should adopt a fee or leave it for now at this point in the draft, leave it no fee?
Yeah.
This is getting a little bit into the weeds, but Culver says maximum of 30 for any business entity within a 5-year period. Do we want to say business per building or both? So let's say we put $5,000 into Connie's building in a grant. And then she sells that building and the new owner comes in and says, I want to do something, I want to do X, Y, and Z. Do we say different businesses okay? Or do we say this building has gotten it, we can't do that? And especially if what this new owner wants to do, like undoes what Connie did and we're funding to undo work we funded.
My only
Yeah.
fear, I was just gonna say, my only fear is I feel like there would be only like 1 or 2 developers in the area that's gonna constantly come back and get that. And if we want to continue to promote and help people do that, I would worry that it's not gonna be 20 new individuals that come in here, it's gonna be the same faces over and over and over and over again. That probably own most of downtown currently the way it stands. So I would hate to do that, and then we've got $20,000 sitting there that there's just, nobody's coming through that door anymore because we've.
So would we just say the building or just say the business and then maybe put in an exec? If somebody's applying for funds to undo work we have already funded, you're on your own because we're not going to duplicate investment.
I don't want to, but I also don't want for somebody improving their building. Applicant funds, somebody themselves only has $10,000 to have a phase project. Nobody else is going to make 5 years ago have the money.
Oh, I don't agree with that. My concern is if,
Like, I mean, I'm saying, like, I don't know why we have to put on it. We're gonna look at the projects and evaluate, prioritize. And if, like I said, if I as a business owner can only invest $1,000, 10, like, I just don't have. But I'm willing year over year.
Okay, so if I'm a developer and I come to the first meeting and I say I have 18 projects, I'm applying 18 times.
Put a few months in between applications.
That's, so yes, I want to encourage people to do it, but I also can see areas of.
If you're a developer, you know,
Do I come to the first meeting and ask for every single building?
like
And
as a developer.
so let's say Brian just buys every building on the 100 East block of Pearl Street.
Oh, you bought the whole plot.
Right.
You're gonna improve every facade. Our goal is to improve the way downtown looks. Right now, there are whole blocks that need a facade
Right.
improvement. And if it's on individual buildings, like if it's on the individual storefront, why wouldn't we want them all to be nicer?
I think that's what his question was, is do you limit the person or business, or do you limit the building?
Yeah, and we don't necessarily have to limit it. But my point in bringing this up and adding that question about whether what caller says is sufficient or if we need to address is like, I especially don't want a scenario where we are being asked to fund work that undoes work we have already thought was a good improvement. Oh, Johnny buys the Opera House from Mike and Jenny and puts all this work into it. And it looks great. And we wanted it. And then he flips it and somebody says, well, can you give me a grant? Because I want to take down all of the siding and awnings they just put up and just, well, those are like 3 years old and we just paid for those. No, we're not going to do that. And so that's why I'm wondering if we need some sort of limit and how that should be worded. Maybe we just say, and also maybe rather than a hard cap, it's, we just need to word it somewhere. We have the discretion to award less, and that goes back to the flexibility and up to 50%. We can't afford to put another $8,000 into the building we just put $8,000 into last year because we have 3 other really good applications and we have limited funds. So maybe we don't need a hard cap. I just think we need to make sure that whether it's through a cap or through flexible language and a scorecard or a combination, we have a way to make sure that we don't get sucked into like allocating half of our available funds to one building or one developer or one business owner to the detriment of others.
I think I want the discretion, because to your point, yes, if this person's here asking for the money because they're going to do the work, great. However, I don't want that to discourage somebody else from maybe potentially buying a building and going to do some work, but saying, I don't have any access to any funds now because developer A came and took everything in January.
So like a limit on the number that.
Potentially, yeah.
You could come back.
Correct. Yeah.
So keep the annual and maybe get more flexible with the 5-year. Yeah. Because right now, as presented, it's 10,000 per year, no more than 30 over 5 years. Be more flexible with that 30, but keep 10 or whatever so that we're not allocating too much in any one year.
I would say I like that idea. Flexible.
I like it too. I think for me though, is just if you put, and maybe I'm wrong, but like if you put 3 months in between applications, right? I think that's opening up fair opportunity for somebody else to walk through that door.
Mhm.
And if nobody's walking through that door, then
Yeah.
why not give it to them?
Mhm.
And so I think that's probably where I'm leaning more towards, is just putting a time limit in between application processes. And then that gives somebody an opportunity to come in here and they can't just suck it out all in January really quick. I guess the question I have, because go back to the discretionary thing, is I guess I'm not seeing how we ever get handcuffed or money sucked out of you, because we can just say no. I mean, it's just as simple as they can just say no.
No, you're right. Getting back in part to the concern Brandy raised about making sure we protect ourselves legally, I want us to have something that makes it very clear we have the discretion to say no or to say yes, but not as much as you're asking, so that when they sign that application, they're acknowledging that they know that that's a possibility, that we might only give them 30% of what they're asked instead of
Right.
50 because.
And I think we have to, and I think this probably just gets rewritten every year as we learn what people are willing to
Sure,
try
Probably,
to do.
yeah.
And because you want as much transparency to the public as possible, people want to know, what am I going to get approved, or am I wasting my time? So I think having that in there is to say, okay, we're not going to give it to you because we don't like this. We'll go back to the table, we'll rewrite it, and then everybody can see it again to say, don't try that one. Like this is probably going to get rewritten every year.
Last 3 bullet points here, guidelines section, I think, are very good. I want to keep those. Grant approval is at the sole discretion of the board. Rules and regulations of the grant program are subject to change at any time and on funds being made available by Pulaski County Council and the county board. I think that's good with talking about what you're talking about, with being transparent, letting people know, like, this is kind of a living program, it's going to change. You know, keeping that in mind about the sole discretion.
Because you go back to the other, you get to December and you got $5,000 left and you got 2 applicants. You know, does the lag say, look, guys, I got $5,000, you each get 25? Because I want to make sure I try to get everybody, but.
Doesn't mean you can't come back in 3 months if there's a way you can make it work, but for now, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, yeah.
Okay, page 17, the big block of green, that's just where I've said, when I started this conversation, I don't know that we want to dive into the microloan sister program yet. I think we probably get through the grant program and then we can figure out if we want to pursue a separate microloan program, if we just want to work with the EDC and the commissioners on like some sort of streamlined fast track revolving loan fund project in cases where the RC has already vetted a project and it's like at that micro level. I don't want to, and then the last one is the one at the top that gets it. Do we want this to be a reimbursement program where they bring us the invoices after they've paid, or a bring us the invoices and we're going to pay the contractor direct? Okay. And the only reason I was thinking that the pay the contractors avenue is from the county auditor's office perspective. There are a finite number of contractors. We might see in a case where somebody brings in an out of county, but there are a finite number of contractors who are going to be doing work here, going to want to do this kind of work, going to be available. And so if the auditor's office has 12 vendors to add versus a new vendor every time a new business owner applies, it might be a little less burdensome on them. Whether
I don't want text. Right.
now that's a good counterpoint. That
I'd go back to like, what is standard? You don't have to read. What are the majority?
I think we saw them do reimbursement, which simplifies that problem. What it brings up for me though is that the business owner has to have that money up front.
Yes.
And if they really need it with this grant, then they don't have it up front. So I want to know what, to pay the contractor directly, like what are the cons to that?
I think Brandy's point is probably the most relevant con, that like we're cutting multiple checks. We can't necessarily trust that the contractor is going to pay his subs what he owes them, and then we might end up being dragged into litigation because Billy's painting service didn't get paid by Joey's masonry service or whatever. I will see if we can, I'll see first if any of the other programs do the contractor pay versus reimbursement. I think Brandy makes a very good point there, but I agree with Katie that if I'm making you come up with the $10,000 up front, that might be tight on your cash flow. You might have to forgo paying some bills or bringing in enough stock or whatever until you've gotten the reimbursement. And we don't want to create additional hardships for our applicants that might drive them away from the program. All right, I will update this based on today's conversation. I'll send out Stan's scorecard after I've maybe made some modifications to it. I'll send it out as is and everything else he sent, but I'll work on modifying it. And I'll go looking for other county programs and look into if there are any other counties that do contractor pay. And we will try to hammer this out a little more next month. And again, like Brandy said, we don't have funding guaranteed yet. There's no deadline to get this. The sooner we do feel like we have reached a consensus and we can adopt it, the sooner we can take it to the commissioners and our council and try to sell them on it. But there's no deadline in place right now.
I do have one question,
Yes.
just to give everybody an opportunity to think about it. So the broadband grants that I'm familiar with, whether it's state or federal, they're taxed. And so that's probably something we might want to look at for the grant program is if you give them 10 grand, do they have to pay 3 back? It was very frustrating for us to say a grant should be a grant. So I don't know what we would have to do as far as taxes, but every program we've been a part of, it's something that's always talked about in the shadows, but it's extremely frustrating if you'd have to grant.
I hate you, Stan.
So I'll leave that with the group to discuss on maybe how to handle that.
I will look into that.
Thank you for
That-
bringing that up.
Thank you for that. Really, seriously, love you, man. Okay.
Here's your $69.97.
What's that?
Here's your $69.97. All right, anything else on the facade? All right, meeting schedule.
Last thing on old business, just an update on the summit. I will send this out in your email too. It is officially booked for the Knights of Columbus Hall, 6 p.m. on Tuesday, the 28th of April.
Any potential impact to change?
Mr. Cohagen did not think that would be an issue. That was the first thing I asked him is if they were still, and he said April would still be acceptable. I may have mentioned this to you for the record, and I mentioned one of them earlier. We will have 2 speakers this year instead of just the one, but it will be more of like a conversational presentation than 2 people just walking through their slide deck and their talking points. It'll be Adam Sturwald, whom I mentioned earlier in the meeting, talking about the resolution. He is an attorney at Barnes & Thornburg who specializes in redevelopment commissions amongst other fields. He is one of the co-authors of the annual updates to the Indiana Redevelopment Commission Handbook, and he was recommended to me by the Redevelopment Association. Other one will be a gentleman by the name of Ed Curtin. He is a redevelopment and other things consultant based somewhere, I want to say he's in Jackson County. He was previously the Assistant Parks Director for the City of Columbus and the Redevelopment Commission Director for the City of Columbus. He has done a lot of consulting work across the state and was also recommended by the RAI. There may be, because it is our 30th anniversary, a cash bar and champagne toast. I am still working out those details. We don't typically serve alcohol at these. We did in 2016 for the 20th. We may be doing that for this. We won't next year, but still working out those details. I will send this out to you via email. I think they're going to be really great. And I think, again, they're talking about redevelopment issues. People in this room are the most important people of all the commissions I work with to hear this message. But I think everyone's going to benefit from it. And I think it'll be pretty engaging with some of the brief conversation I've had with them both and with the conversational approach to the presentation. And we've had some good PowerPoint talking point presentations in the past, but those can get dry, they can go stale. I think that having conversational and they're going to allow for plenty of time for Q&A, and I'm hoping that at least to a limited extent, we can integrate the Q&A in the conversation, like Adam says something and somebody say, hey, wait a minute, what? And I think they're going to be open. Only thing under new business is meeting schedule. And that's on page 19, that is the full community development meeting schedule. If it's highlighted, it's us. We agreed via email on a regular monthly time. We did not, however, ever make a formal public decision, and I don't want to send this out and say this is the adopted schedule without having the board's stamp of approval on it. So it is, with the exception of the month of September, it is, as we discussed, the third Thursday of each month at 5:30 p.m. I know that I will be out of town on the 24th of September, so it's up to you folks if you want to cancel it for that month, move it up 1 or 2 days, or move it to another Thursday in the month. Have to be, but I've got to make sure that the live stream is going, that you've got all the meeting packet stuff.
I was just asking, like, so that you did not have to like rearrange things. I'm not touching that.
So you have that, so we're scheduled, tentatively scheduled for the third Thursday of every month.
Yes.
The September one is the 4th, but you
Yeah.
can't, why is it not the 3rd in September?
Because the third, I will be out of town. I know I will be out of town the third Thursday of September.
So the 24th you would be available?
Yes, the 24th
Gotcha.
is what I was proposing as an alternate.
Yeah. I was
Okay.
confused too.
I thought you said you were going to be
Sorry.
out the
I was
24th.
proposing that as an alternate, but it's up to you guys if you want to push it back a week, push it forward, just push it up to the Tuesday or Wednesday of that week. But like I said, I want to get this on the website and submit it to the media as our formal schedule rather than confirming with you every month and saying, hey, notice to the public, this is a special meeting. And your schedule could change by that point, right?
Yeah.
But for now.
Don't, I honestly just keep it a Thursday and just move the week would be.
All right, somebody want to make a motion to adopt this calendar for the rest of this year?
I'll make.
Second, please.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
All right, does anyone else have anything for the good of the order? Do we have any public
Public
comment,
comment?
ladies? Mike should be on. The
The
middle
both
table,
on,
both of them
I
at the
think.
middle table should be on.
Okay. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about my experience with the façade program and
I know,
listening
Jenny,
to
can you just
everything
state
you
your
said.
name
Jenny
Thank you.
Knievel, Commissioner, thank you. One of these times I'll remember that.
again?
I do want to say, how to get your name again, Kyle. Best comment made tonight, keep it simple on the facade. I don't think I ever met with anybody when I did mine at Culver. So there was a one-page sheet, I filled it out, it went to them, they said, hey, we have a limited budget each year. If you're not selected this year, you can reapply for next year and you'll be considered. So I knew going into it that I may not get it. It was per individual, I believe, when I did it. So it was, you can apply for so much per year. If you want to come back later, you can. But again, they didn't have an overabundance of money, and this was Culver. So you would think if anybody was going to have a lot of money, Culver would have it.
Don't
They're
all the
stellar.
richest people live outside of the corporate limits?
Yeah, well, probably, but they're a stellar community, but I don't think they had a grand amount each year. So it was get in early, put your application in. I will say though, you mentioned on the, if we've given money to one building, we don't want to do it again. But I'm going to tell you from my business model, branding is extremely important to me. And if I'm going to sell ice cream, I'm selling it from a green building. And it's going to be branded as Sally's. So if I'm going to look at a building in, let's say I'm going to look at a building in Francisville. I don't care if it was redone the year before. If I'm renting, I'm asking the owner of the building, can I go ahead and brand it as my business, as Sally? So I would expect to be able to do that. And if I couldn't, I'm not going to do it because it's my visual. People go by, they see a green building, they know it's Sally's. So I didn't have to, and even when I filled out my application, I didn't have to tell them what color I was painting the building in Culver. I didn't have to show them my awning. Had they asked, I would have shown them, but I didn't have to do that. So it was very basic. And like I say, I never met with anybody. I turned it in. Within a couple weeks, I had back, you were approved or you weren't approved. The money, did have to pay it all, at one time, and I was reimbursed. When you have somebody coming to put up an awning, they want to check when they leave. They're not waiting to be paid. A painter, they're not waiting to get paid. They want paid immediately. And that's probably why Culver did it that way. You've got to pay them, or you better make sure that money is ready to go, or that check from the committee ASAP, because they don't want to wait on that.
Can I interrupt and ask you
Yeah.
a question before
Yeah.
you? So I think you make a very good point about, I don't care that Joey just put money in, we just funded his building, I have a brand. Do you think there's a line to be drawn between something more superficial like paint and something like we just put in brand new windows and now this person wants to?
I don't think anybody's gonna, if new windows were put in, business owners don't have a lot of money. What business owner, if the windows are newer, is gonna come in, Nathan, and say, I want to put in brand new windows?
That's fair.
I mean, most of us are, anybody that owns a business knows you don't have a lot of time, which is why I like the ease. Put it in, get it done, boom. But you're just looking to present something. These people are improving your community. Whatever it is they're doing, whatever amount of money they're putting in, it's an improvement to what was existing. So you need to be thankful that they're even coming. And I honestly don't think you're going to have that many people who are going to come do this. It's expensive. All these buildings are expensive to do. So you may be begging people through the year, come on, this money's here. I just don't see you having and again, you got to advertise it.
Yep.
If I hadn't asked, I never would have known that money was available in Culver. So a lot of people aren't going to know to even ask for that. But again, when you're talking about the facade, windows, doors, paint, awning, flower boxes, signage, that's basically all you're looking at. That's the facade. If they can improve it, great. Don't give them a ton of hoops to jump through. You're going to discourage them. They're going to go away and they're going to say, forget it. I'll either find another building or I'm not going to do it, period. So make it easy, very easy. So as far as a committee, again, I don't know that you're going to have that many that you need to start out with a committee. I might start it and say, we're going to do it as the board. Because whatever Culver was doing, it had to have been a very easy process because it was quick. And I think I did have my reimbursement money within 2 weeks, probably after I'd paid, for things to get done. But it's a great program. You want people to use it. So keep it easy. Keep it easy. That's just my recommendation.
Can I interject one more on to Stan's point? Did you pay tax on it? So did you just get a flat? Did you get taxed on it or did you?
No, I did not get taxed on it.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember.
So you reimbursed, like I asked for $5,000 and they gave me a check for $5,000.
No, I had to show my,
The reimbursement, but you got
Yes.
you got it all.
yes. I had my receipt for awning and paint and I submitted it to them and they paid half. They just gave me a check for half of it is what happened. Yeah, but I did have to pay it all out of pocket first, just because they want their money, most do. And I can't think of anything else, but great program. But
Thank you,
yeah, as
Jen.
far as we gave it to them 1 year and we're not going to do it the next. And they were pretty easy about, sorry, we're out of money, just. come back
Given
next year.
to the same my question was more like, do we want to undo something we've done? But your
You
point is well
understand
taken
why,
about
though.
yes.
Yeah,
your point
for
is well
me,
taken.
it would be the difference of I'm going to use this builder, I'm not going to use it, because if I can't brand it the way I need it, then I don't want the
makes sense.
building at all. Yeah. And I know it's not that way for everybody, but that's just an example.
No, I appreciate that. Thank
You
you.
did bring up that you rented over there, right?
I rented all my buildings.
Did you have
So,
to get your,
right, so when you applied, did you have to show that your landlord was approving of you painting?
Boy, I don't think I did, but they probably knew him,
fair enough.
But no, I don't think I had to say anything.
Okay.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, he told me he'd pay half the paint of my paint. And he never
Again, a
paid
lot
half
of the,
paint. And I
the
had
building
to
owners
pay.
are probably gonna say, you want to do something great, but I get it, but I mean, I also.
Yeah, no, I don't think I did, but maybe they asked him on the side.
Sure.
I don't know, Brian, but yeah, but it was easy. So,
Thank you,
yeah,
Jenny. I appreciate it.
yeah, thank you guys. And
Connie?
I hope it works out.
Hi, I'm Connie Ehrlich, and I'll keep this very brief. I realize your vision and the mission statement is a work in process, but would you be willing to read, Katie, like what you proposed, and then maybe some of the revisions that Brian and Brandy, could you just read that for transparency, knowing that it's not final?
Sure. So this is a printout of the Google Doc that we're all editing in. So some of these, you're going to get some comments from some other people. So Pulaski County Redevelopment Commission. And then we're thinking maybe a tagline. It's the simple things, leveraging our history for a brighter future. I'll work on that. Mission statement. The Pulaski County Redevelopment Commission serves the citizens of Pulaski County, Indiana by stewarding and promoting redevelopment sources with transparency and integrity. The commission works to strengthen the local tax base, expand housing and employment opportunities, and invest in infrastructure and places that reflect the values, aspirations, and shared priorities of Pulaski County, supporting community-driven growth cultivated from within. Through open governance and collaborative partnerships, the commission advances redevelopment that honors the heart of the community and supports a thriving future for all residents and future generations. And then I'm going to read Nathan's. He said, the Pulaski County Redevelopment Commission drives community growth, tax base enhancement, quality of life improvements, and the creation of economic opportunities by revitalizing underutilized properties, promoting business development, and enhancing infrastructure across the county through partnerships, targeted investments, programs, and projects that reflect the values, aspirations, and priorities of the residents we serve. And then Brian's, which I think was mentioned, but the Redevelopment Commission's mission is to work with, collaborate with, partner with elected officials, townships, and community members to best make Pulaski County a place where businesses and families want to work, live, and play.
And I will also add what Stan had sent me later. Pulaski County Redevelopment Commission partners with towns, townships, and community stakeholders to convert underused properties and districts into productive places, strengthening local businesses, expanding housing and workforce readiness, reinvesting in quality of place through transparent, measurable projects. So we all kind of got more or less in the same vicinity, with some a little more detailed than others and X or Y or Z, but we're all sort of heading in the right direction, and we will wordsmith that all together.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Somebody want to make a motion to adjourn?
Say any other public comments? Good, all right. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Let's go home.
We are adjourned at 7:14. Thank you, everybody.
He was gonna send it out. I think he was gonna.
I will send everything out.
Okay, that's fine too.
But then the scorecard, like I said, I'll kind of work on seeing how much we can adapt to Solomon, and then share that with everyone who had their contribution.
Well, when I was working through it too, I basically was just trying to find a property in each town, so that's how the results got to what they were. Okay.